How's everybody doing? Good, good, good. Excellent. So welcome to Storytelling, the Art of Engagement. First question I want to ask you, show of hands. Who here would benefit from engaging your clients, your customers, your colleagues in deeper, more meaningful conversations? Show of hands. I have great news for you. This is the presentation for you. You're going to learn today a little bit around the concept of using stories as a very powerful tool for making connection. I also wanted to share with you that you are all storytellers. You're all storytellers. Some of you may be better than others, but the good news is that storytelling is a skill that can be learned. So to start our presentation today, I wanted to share with you some words of wisdom from what I consider to be a master storyteller from Pixar.
Hey, Pete.
Oh, hey, Val.
How's it going?
You know what? I'm having a really bad day.
What happened?
See, what Val's saying when she says, what happened is, tell me a story. And that's actually what this season of Pixar in a Box is all about.
To make a movie here at Pixar takes years, but it all starts with a story. Humans have been telling stories since we could speak, probably even before. We tell stories around the campfire. We write plays, we write novels, short stories, we make movies, we take photographs, tweet to each other, the list goes on. The power of story is that it has an ability to connect with people on an emotional level. One of the things you hear all the time, this advice, is write what you know. Now, as a kid, I was like, I don't want to write about suburban Minnesota. That's boring. I want to write about explosions and monsters and car chases. Well, what that actually means is, yeah, go ahead and write about monsters and explosions and car chases, but put something into it that talks about your own life, how you feel. Do you feel scared? Do you feel alone? Something from your own life will make that story come alive and not just be a boring car chase. When I started directing Monsters Incorporated, the way I would pitch it is, it's about a monster who scares kids for a living. That's his job. He clocks in, he clocks out, he eats donuts and talks about union dues, and we thought that was a pretty funny idea. And sure enough, when I would tell it to people, they would smile. But when we told the story as a film, people started getting bored and restless, and they're like, I don't understand what this movie's about. Well, what I finally figured out was that it's actually not about a monster who scares kids. It's about a man becoming a father. And that was what was happening to me. So why write about what you know? Well, it's because probably what happened to you made you feel some particular way. And what you're trying to do really when you tell a story is to get the audience to have that same feeling.
All right, let me test your active listening skills. Finish this sentence. The power of a story is, he said it in the video. Who said that? Oh, yeah, Alice, give it up for Alice, absolutely. Did you hear what she said? The power of a story is that it helps people to connect on an emotional level. So what I find really awesome about the timing of this presentation today is we've heard a lot this morning about technology, right? And even as I look out in the room here, I see a lot of people on the phones and on their computers, and I don't know if you're using it to take notes or if you're watching cat videos on YouTube, I don't know. But we've heard a lot about technology. And I'm not anti-technology, don't get me wrong. And we need to find a way to connect on an emotional level with people. And that is the art of engaging with stories. My clicker, there we go. So, we're not telling stories for the sake of telling stories. Let me be really clear here. I don't want you to be thinking this is some sort of fluffy concept. This is hardcore. This is about creating stories in a business context with clear intention as to what it is you want to make people think, feel, or do differently as a direct result of your story. So if I was coaching you, I would say to you, think of your message. What do you want people to think, feel, or do differently? Create a story to help people to connect to that on an emotional level. So what I'd like to do today is just to introduce you to the idea around the power of using stories to add value and to differentiate yourself. At Double Digit Sales, we have a whole program on story selling. We can do a half day, we can do a full day, and in that program, we actually teach people how to build, write, and tell short stories, 2 to 3 minutes in length, within a business context. I have less than 30 minutes with you today. So instead, I want to go kind of big picture, more conceptual. I want to inspire and excite you around the idea of starting to create, in writing, on paper, stories that you can use to have a higher degree of influence and a higher degree of engagement. Why stories? There's a scale here, right? On the one hand, you have your products, you have your services. You have the data. You have the information, which is awesome, and you have to have that expertise. So why do you need a story? It goes back to connection, because the story helps people to make meaning out of those products and those services, right? If all you're talking about is a widget, it's a widget. But if you can convince me that that widget will help me to be more efficient, will help me to drive my bottom line, that will help me to be a better communicator, I don't know what it is, but if you can connect that to a story, let me tell you a story about how I learned how to use widgets. Suddenly I'm more interested. How many of you know a great storyteller? Whether it's your aunt, your uncle, Obama, somebody on TV, whatever, right? We all have, boy, right here, okay. What happens when somebody tells a really great story? Like physically, what happens to people? They lean in. They listen. They pay attention. So, if you want to go on and continue to pitch products and services, all the more power to you. But if you want to grab people's attention, for them to pay attention, to listen, and to be interested, then you need to wrap it up with a story. Again, we've been talking a lot about technology, right? I still don't know what the cloud is, honest. I just got to be honest. I don't know what that is. I keep looking up to the air, like, what, all my stuff's up there? How do I get it? So you've got the cloud, you've got, iPhones, you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got Instagram, it goes on and on and on and on. When you think back to your parents, even 20, 30 years ago, how did they get information? Yell it out. The newspaper. What else? Pardon? Radio. Keep going. Books, television. What about the neighbor? Friends, conversations, right? So even 20, 30 years ago, if you jump forward to where we are now, we're inundated with technology. The problem with being inundated with technology is this: it creates noise. Noise. And what's really important, your days look like this. You're inundated with technology, and some of that is noise, and so are your clients and your customers and your colleagues. So what becomes really imperative that we're not teaching people is how to sift through all that noise and get to the meaning. Focus on what pieces of information are important and critical for me to be successful. Back to technology. This is the inside of the cockpit of a plane. What's missing in this photo? The pilot, yeah, what else is missing? The co-pilot, maybe, yes, what else? The digital, okay, what else is missing? The window. So imagine that this is a cell phone, right? We walk through our lives like this, heads down. And if our heads are down, Instagram, Twitter, I don't know, all that technology, what are we missing? Everything. We're missing each other, we're missing the vision, right? So what stories do, and it's really powerful if you think about it, is they take us from here to here, where we can see the journey, right? We can connect to the vision. Very powerful. Great book that I would strongly recommend is by Annette Simmons called Story Factor. It's a little book, it's not a big read. And I'm just going to draw your attention to the last sentence in this quote, which is, people don't need more facts. What they need is a new story. Where this becomes really, really important, by the way, is for any of you who are working and living in a data-driven world. Because the thing about living in a data-driven world is that people will take that data and they will make their own story about that data. If you are, for example, in the CPG world, consumer packaged goods, which is a very data-driven world, right? You go in to a prospective customer with your Nielsen findings, with your data, and you say, this is what the data says. And the customer goes, no, I don't think so. Well, but it's right here, it's in black and white. Yeah, no, that doesn't really resonate for me. But the data, but it's the data. Doesn't matter. Just to bring this back to a more of a personal level, holidays are coming up, you're going to be spending time with your families. Do you ever have a conversation with one of your siblings where you're reminiscing about a childhood memory and you both have two radically different versions of that? You're like, how is that possible? We were both there. I have this conversation with my younger brother Kenny all the time. He said, that didn't happen. I said, of course it happened. I was there. Well, it didn't happen like that. People have life experiences. They have their own values. They have their own belief systems that no matter what kind of data you give them, all of that comes into play. And you're foolish to think otherwise with your clients and your customers. It's not about the facts. It's not about the data. It's about the story. What does the data mean? It comes back to meaning. So I have a bit of a unique background as a facilitator with double-digit sales. I actually have a master's degree in counseling psychology. And as a result of that, I like to do a lot of research. And I wanted to share with you one particular research study that I find fascinating, and it connects to this topic that we're chatting about right now, which is stories. So what happened in this research study is the researchers put together some focus groups and they gave them two stories. And I'm going to give you those exact same story A and story B. They gave the research participants $5 to donate to Save the Children, which is a nonprofit charitable organization. Depending upon which story resonated for them the most, story A or story B, the research participants would give as much of their $5 as they wanted. I brought it with me because I didn't want to make it up and get it wrong. I'm going to read the two stories to you. I want you to trust your gut, and I want you to be honest, no judgment, and decide which of these stories, story A or story B, would you donate your money to save the children? You ready? Yeah? You with me? Yeah. Okay, here's story A. Food shortages in Malawi are affecting more than 3 million children. In Zambia, severe rainfall deficits have resulted in a 42% drop in maize production from 2000. As a result, an estimated 3 million Zambians face hunger. 4 million Angolians, which is 1/3 of the population, have been forced to flee their homes. More than 11 million people in Ethiopia need immediate food assistance. Story B. Any money you donate will go to Roikia, a 7-year-old girl who lives in Mali in Africa. Roikia is desperately poor and faces a threat of severe hunger, even starvation. Her life will be changed for the better as a result of your financial gift. With your support and the support of other caring sponsors, Save the Children will work with Roikia's family and other members of the community to help feed and educate her and provide her with basic medical care. Show of hands. Story A. Yeah, there's going to be some people put up their hand. Don't be shy. Don't be. Yeah. There's at least 3 hands that went up. Why did you pick story A?
Very mathematical.
I'm a mathematical guy. I'm a numbers guy. Who else had their hand up for story? Why did you choose story A, sir? You felt like you could have more of an impact on a bigger scale? No? Oh, okay. Defines the problem more global versus as an individual. Okay. So, redundant question, but humor me. Show of hands, story B. All right. So for those of you who feel really powerful about this story B, tell me why. Why would you give your money to save the children for Roikia? It's personal. Who has children here? Yeah? I can't even watch those commercials on TV with the starving kids, right? It's like, in fact, I probably have fed my daughter more food just because the idea of her going hungry drives me insane. Who else? Tell me why you chose Roikia. It's personal. What else? Someone else. Why'd you choose? Yeah. It's the opposite of the first story. Right? A million people versus one, right? You're able to connect more, again, on an emotional level. Okay, so now here's where the research study gets really cool. Now, what if you heard both stories? What if there was a focus group, and that's what they did in this research study, where they gave them the facts, story A, and story B, the Roikia story. Show of hands, do you think those research participants gave more or less? Who thinks they gave more? Put up your hand. They heard both stories. Who thinks they gave less? Okay, so a lot of people didn't vote. Just saying. So it may surprise you to know that they gave less. So what does this tell us? What it tells us is that feelings, not facts, drive spending. Did you get that? Feelings, not facts, drive spending. Story A, stats, data. Story B, Roikia. Story 3, facts and Roikia. The story that got the most donations was story B, Roikia. Hands down. So something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to telling stories, the art of telling stories, there's a few things you need to know. And again, in the short time that we have today, I'm just going to give you a little nibble so you can get a sense of this. The first thing is that you need to know there are 4 types of stories, right? 4 types of stories. There's success. I think we all know what those are. There's failure stories. I think we all know what those are. There's fun stories. The only comment I'll make about that is it should be appropriate humor in a work context. And then the last one is a legend story. The great thing about a legend story is that you don't have to be the legend, right? It could be a legend from your industry. It could be a legend that's in the media, or a legend that's even no longer with us, right? These are the kinds of stories that really inspire and motivate people. So, I think we have a mic running around, but we're doing pretty good just with me repeating what you say, so let's just kind of keep with this. If I was to tell you, you could only tell one of these 4 story types, which one would you tell and why? You can only pick one. Yeah, which one would you tell and why?
Success, because I would tell a success story because you overcome the fear and inaction in your customer.
Okay, and just out of interest, and anybody can answer this, what context do you think you would tell a success story? What situation or context would you want to tell a success story? Finalist in a presentation, right? This is how we've been successful. Any other situations you can just think off the top of your head? A pain point. So how does that connect to a success story?
A pain point meaning that there's something going on in the supply chain, so this is happening. You can tell a story related to maybe a hardship with the customer that relates to how you have the customer overcome.
Could you give him the microphone there? Oh. Sorry, I know. Can you say that one more time? Because it was so good. Can you say it one more time?
Pain points. In terms of what I'm thinking is when a customer explains there's a problem in their supply chain that stands out, and you can tell a story that relates to how you help that customer overcome.
Right.
Will
right?
create some creative value.
Beautiful. Now, interestingly enough, that could also be like a combo success and failure, right? Or a success and legend. So you can combine some of these story types together. Okay, success is off the table, my friends. So out of the 3 that are left, failure, fun, legend, which would you tell and why? Yep, very back of the room. Can you just yell it out, hon?
I typically tell failures.
Nice.
Shows vulnerability, so that's usually why I use it.
And you need to...
Products show how they can overcome that.
Beautiful. One of the gentlemen sitting on either side of you, could you please give him a high five for me? There, yeah. That nicely done. Because here's the thing, we almost never hear that. Very few people want to tell a failure story, right? And why is that? Let's just keep it real. Ego. Makes us look bad. Makes us feel insecure. Whereas what you were sharing, which I'll share with all of you who didn't hear, is that when I tell a failure story, it shows my vulnerability. It shows my humanness. Again, helps people to connect to the frailty of the human condition, which is awesome. All right, failure's off the table. Oh, by the way, what would be the context, business context, in which you might tell a failure story?
Typically, like we sell, I'm with Dear Employees Credit Union, so we sell different products, say like a Gap product, and I'll tell a story about how I had some occurrence happen and I wasn't protected.
Beautiful. So GAM product, this is a credit union individual over here. We do a lot of work in double-digit sales in the whole FI space, the financial services, asset management firms, and all of that. And this is the same thing, right? Think about insurance. You tell a failure story as a cautionary tale. This is what happened to this individual who didn't buy insurance, and this is, something that happened to them. So a cautionary tale, lessons learned, right? Lessons learned. That's the main reason you would tell a failure story, is to share a lesson learned. You might want to share a failure story on somebody you're onboarding at your company, what not to do, right? As a manager, as a leader, here, let me share with you some of my mistakes so you don't have to make the same ones, right? Okay, last two, fun, legend. Which one? Fun, and why would you tell a fun story?
I would tell a fun story just because it breaks the ice.
Beautiful, breaks the ice. Yeah, that's a great idea, right? Anybody else? Context in which you would tell a fun story. So breaks the ice. Yeah. There's some hesitation, so you want to make people a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more open and receptive. Yeah, back of the room. Just humility. Yeah, right? And again, appropriate humor is important to keep in mind. But absolutely. Okay, good. Lighten the mood. Let's say you're involved in some contract negotiations or there's a conflict on the table. Again, if it's appropriate, might be a way to kind of ease the tension in the room too, right? Lots of different contexts in which you might tell these stories. The last one is legend. Would anybody here tell a legend story? Yeah, and tell me why you would tell a legend story. Credibility. Okay. So what would be the context in which you would tell a legend story, a business context?
In my context, I work for a company that developed a unique protocol that puts us in a unique position to solve and address the problems.
Excellent. So as a way to highlight that you are unique, that you are different, as part of your value prop, you tell a legend story, right? This is what makes us exceptional. This is actually a really important point because it doesn't really matter what industry all of you folks are in. This is a very competitive landscape, right? We can no longer compete on price, my friends. There will always be somebody who can do it faster, cheaper, slicker, always, right? So if you're not competing on price, you're competing on value. And if you're competing on value, you need every tool you can in your toolkit. And one of those tools can be a story about the value that you bring to the table. So the first thing that you would need to know to become a better storyteller is that there's 4 types of stories. Good? All right. Second thing you would need to know is that there is an acronym. I'm going to give this to you in about 30 seconds, and from now on, you will never be able to read another book, watch another movie, hear another podcast without looking at it through the lens of this criteria. Because if all elements of CASE, C-A-S-E, are in play, chances are it's a story you're going to remember. C. C stands for characters. Was there a story you heard this morning that had a character that you still remember right this moment? Tell me what was the... Gerhardt's grandmother, right? Why do you remember her? There was a picture. Is there any other reasons why you remember her? How old was she? 88, right? We had a visual of her in a house. We got this visual of her, she wants everybody to leave the B&B happy. She ran that B&B till she was 88. That's a story, but you remember it because the character was memorable. Okay. A, actions. Remember, we're talking about short stories, right? 2 to 3 minutes in length. We do a lot of work, I used to do a lot of work with pharmaceutical reps. A pharmaceutical rep might get 30 seconds with the chief of surgeon on his way to surgery, right? You can tell a 30-second story. So anywhere from, I say, 30 seconds up to 3 minutes in length. We're talking about short stories. You would want to have 3, maybe 4 actions or scenes. 3 or 4 maybe actions or scenes that you remember, right? What happens in the story? What are the actions? Structure. Beginning, middle, end. If a story has a strong beginning, middle, and end, chances are you're going to remember it more. And then finally, the E is for emotions. A good story makes you feel something. Good, bad, or indifferent, but it makes you feel something. So when we coach people on how to build, write, and tell engaging stories, we again think about emotions in the story, so put emotion in the story, but also, again, how do you want your audience, whoever that audience might be, to feel as a result of that story? Again, be intentional. So you put the feelings in the story, but you also want to be aware, how do I want the person who's hearing the story to feel as a result of the story? So that's CASE. So you now know that there's 4 types of stories. You know the acronym for CASE. The other piece that's really important to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that your story is short. Stories do not have to be long to be effective. So I would like to share with you very quickly a short story to highlight this point. This is a true story. It's a personal story from my family. I have a niece. Her name is Bryn. Bryn is 9 years old, and she's already a competitive ski jumper. Both her and her sister Emily live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, I'm from Toronto. The girls are both competitive ski jumpers. So last winter, they were at an event, and one of their team members, a young 15-year-old boy, went off course, went over a cliff, broke his neck, and died. As a way to help the team deal with this loss, grieve, they held a huge funeral in Comox, BC. It was standing room only. They put speakers out in the parking lot, and they put an open mic on the stage, and they invited the team members to come up and share a story about this young man. Now, you don't know my niece Bryn, but Bryn's about this tall, blonde, blue-eyed, a real firecracker, bordering on Tourette syndrome. Like, you never know what's going to come out of her mouth, right? So my brother Kenny was a little nervous when Bryn started to get out of the church pew and make her way up to the front of the stage. He's like, oh no, what's she going to say? She got up onto the little podium. They adjusted the microphone for her, and she shared her story. It was 4 words. He was my friend. And then she sat back down. So powerful. 4 words. So we have 4 types of stories. We have the CASE acronym. And now you have the message that you want to keep your stories very short. We, again, are not telling stories for the sake of telling stories. You want to be intentional. Think of yourselves as almost like an archer with a quiver of arrows on your back. Each of those quivers represents a story that you've learned over your life and that you've gathered in your business context, right? You want to reach into that quiver and you want to pull out the right story for the right situation so that it lands. If you're just reaching into the quiver and I got a story and let me tell you a story and here's another story, it might land, it might not land, right? So you want to be intentional. Right story, right situation, right customer or colleague, right? Right situation, right story. Be intentional. Then now what? So you've got the what, which is the story. You've got the so what, why are you telling this story? Really super important for me to make sure I communicate to you is the now what. What is your call to action? So when we coach people to create these engaging, powerful stories, we're very clear that, okay, so now at the end of your story, what's the question? So as a result of this story, we like to suggest that you run this pilot in XYZ area of your company so that you can get a better result. Or, so now after hearing this story, would you be willing to sit down with one of our senior sales professionals and have a conversation around moving forward? Now what? So based on this story, share with me what resonated for you in this story. Have you ever had an experience like that? Tell me more about that. How did you guys overcome that? Whatever the now what question is, right? You got to wrap it up with a bow at the end of your story with a very powerful question which generates action. Again, what do you want your audience to think, feel, or do as a direct result of your story? So I'd like to ask you right now to share with me out loud, here's my call to action to you. How could using stories impact your business? I would like you to have a 2-minute conversation at your table, and I'm going to ask a few people to share your thoughts. At your table, think about the 4 types of stories, think about case, think about keeping them short. How could using stories impact your business? Discuss. 2 minutes. I was going to hear a couple of your thoughts, but instead I'm going to wrap this up. I wanted to share with you, just before I wrap up here, that we have Allison Brandt. Allie, do you want her to stand up for a second? This is our president for our U.S. division, based out of New York. We also have Robert Rose. Robert, this is our sales and marketing manager. And we have a booth right outside these doors, actually, very strategically positioned for double-digit sales. So I would encourage you to come by, have a conversation with myself, with Allie, with Rob, if you're interested in learning more about our workshops for story selling. And here's the thing, and Allie, I'm sure you and Rob would agree with me, even if you don't have any interest in the workshop, come on by and share a story with us, because we would love to hear your story. And we may or may not have a couple of free books left over. I don't know for sure, they might all be gone. But I'm sure we could hook you up if you were interested in learning more about our storytelling program. Thank you very, very much. I wish you all the best with the rest of your conference.